2 months. I've been going back and forth, writing down ideas, trying to put it all together, all into words about how Season 3 for the Second Frontier is going, and I can realistically just sum it up super easily with just this. It fucking sucks. Look, I love this game, I want it to succeed, and I want to continue having fun playing it, so being honest and providing constructive criticism is necessary. As a result, expect some brutal honesty in this video. Background footage isn't really going to be relevant, it's just more going to be me talking. The only feature from Season 3 I can think of off the top of my head that was received positively was the gear-based matchmaking system on Bright Sands, but even that is broken with a lower player count and also largely irrelevant with the removal of leadium drills from the map as well. But let's get into it. Let's talk about some of these changes, how it affected the game, and a few ways how these things should have been implemented to actually improve upon the game. Starting off with the gameplay loop. Arguably the most important part of an online game, the reason why players log in day after day and continue to engage with the endgame systems. Well, the Second Frontier decided to not change a thing to the core gameplay loop. Simply put, the loop here is to just complete your quests, upgrade your quarters, make money in PvP. That's it. And for a game that wipes every couple of months, it'd be just about right for where it wants to be. But now we're not wiping anymore. And that's just not enough. There's plenty of ways that the gameplay loop could have been enhanced, but we'll cover that in the second half of this video, where we get into building a better Season 3, but for now, let's get into the content. Simply put, what new content? The game saw 4 major changes this season, with the station rework, Howler quest changes, like Mark II and prototype weapons were added. Arguably only 2 of those should be considered, because the station rework is the equivalent of like a cosmetic skin. It's a nothing change. Still, no firing range, still no customizable quarters, and actually making the problem with the station even worse by making everything just further apart again. So what the fuck? Some of the new quests I think are actually great. The aerial drone on top of the building in the lagoon was a nice touch, but other quests literally made people quit because they were just so hard to complete. For example, Project Fireball had a section where you needed to kill heavy striders during a storm on Bright Sands, and the same on Crescent Falls. A lot of people just couldn't get that done. And, you know, like a lot of these quests were tweaked in a similar fashion to make players spend more time during the storms in an attempt to slow down the more experienced players, but all it really succeeded in doing was making it tedious enough to tip those on the fence over with just the shit time. It's just such a dumb decision that, yeah, they just eventually uninstall the game. And then, in a spectacular fashion, they even managed the same thing with their dedicated side of the player base in the Badham's questline, which is just a grindy joke. Speaking of jokes, the fact that there still isn't a single new weapon is just pathetic. Every single gun has been a reused asset from the old game so far. Mark II and prototype variants had a possibility of being interesting, but the implementation was just botched so bad that they dominated the entire game for over a month, leading to the biggest gear imbalance we've ever seen. The Mark II PDW was better than a Brute, arguably still is better than a Brute, and the Mark II AR was pretty much on par with a Core. So much for those new sci-fi weapons we were promised. Honestly, wouldn't put it past them at this point to play it off as the Howler as their new sci-fi weapon, so actually we did meet our roadmap goals. And honestly, the Howler are actually really cool. The only problem is that you got to kill the Howler to make them, because the crafting requirements are just way overpriced. They cost 2 darts and 10,000 K marks. It's too much. But speaking of the Howler, I truly do not know a single soul that enjoys that fight. And if you are out there, please comment down below what makes it fun for you, because the rest of us are just hurting. Everything about the Howler impedes upon the flow of the map. From its roam range, aggression changes, even the nests. Everything about it makes traversing the map tedious. Which is honestly a shame, because I think the actual design of the Howler is fantastic, but the implementation was absolutely fucked. But I do have a suggestion for a solution, which we will touch on in the second half of the video. So far, we've covered the two major points of a new season, the gameplay and the content. And we found it lacking. Very, very fucking lacking. But we also need to look at other things like performance bugs and cosmetics. So for the performance, not sure what's been going on, but it's been getting just consistently worse over time. Frame drops, desync, fake hit markers, no kill markers. It all makes for a terrible experience whenever one of these things happens to you. Generally speaking, it's going to get you killed as well, because like just the false information that the game provides to you affects your gameplay decisions. If you get enough hit markers to do the majority of someone's HP and decide to push, but in reality you hit them twice, yeah, that's a really big deal, and happens so frequently. This season has just seen more bugs than ever, and seemingly nothing being fixed, with the most complained about invisible gun bug being said to have been fixed twice now, yet still very clearly in the game. Fake birds, fake oil audio, new stuck spots, terrain issues, whatever is going on, it just isn't working. And now we get to the cosmetics. And I'm not sure how long you guys have been playing the game for, but when they transitioned from Season 1 to Season 2, they arbitrarily increased the armour price of nearly every single cosmetic and added rarity tiers to make you feel better about it. All of the melee weapons used to be just 700 aurum flat. Now we have just all of this shit at the store, and then at the same time the battle pass for Season 2 kind of slapped. It was actually had some really cool cosmetics, but unfortunately for Season 3, it doesn't. There are some good ones in there, don't get me wrong, and it definitely does come down to personal choice and preference, but the overall consensus is that the Battle Pass rewards for Season 3 are just not good. And for the shop, we've been seeing skins rotating through that were exclusively a part of purchasable packs, group deals that don't recognize any previously purchased skins, and the worst thing, in my opinion, is the absolutely fucking outrageous pricing of the straight purchasable packs. Keep in mind, I'm Australian, so the dollar amount is going to be a little bit higher than the US, but there ain't no way I'm spending $200 fucking on this shit. The operator skins were cool, and I would have considered spending some of my aurum on them, but for nearly $200? Get out of here with that, man. Like, it's just such a bad decision. Whoever was in charge of pricing it needs to just get another job. Like, it's so off base, just out of touch. Oh, well, got a little bit heated there, sorry, but do you guys want to know what the best part about Season 3 is? Cheaters are back in full force. It's currently worse than Season 1. The only saving grace is the cheater compensation, but it's a sad time when cheats from Season 1 still work in Season 3 without any modification to them, meaning that there's been little to no proactive anti-cheat updates. Only reactive, like detection and banning methods. If that wasn't bad enough, the amount of closet cheaters are on the rise exponentially, with some streamers streaming the most obvious scripts I have ever seen and still not being banned. I actually only learned about mouse scripting about a month ago, but basically after hitting a series of keystrokes, you can inject code into your mouse to move it for you. If effectively set up, it just straight up removes recoil entirely for whatever weapon you have it set up for. For example, hold right click and then hold left click mouse button, and it'll start the script, and that'll just basically follow the recoil path that you've set at that time. We also have some streamers playing with cheaters, streamers in the partnership program paying for carries for the Badham's questline, because that karambit is really going to just, give them some extra viewers or whatever. Some of these guys are even cheating themselves. One of which was magic bulleting me through the map way back in Season 1. Still not banned and now partnered with the game. Because I mostly do YouTube, I tend to record the majority of my raids, and as such can backtrack and reference which cheater comps come from where to back up my claims. But sending in manual reports with video evidence means absolutely nothing, with none of them ever being viewed this season. So what's the fucking point? But cheaters in a game like this is something that's just never going to go away. They can be managed and mitigated with better systems, but that's not going to actually improve the game itself. So let's talk about that. Let's build a better Fortuna 3 right now in the next 10 or 15 minutes. Now, with all of these changes made in Season 3, like inertia, bag weight movement changes, gun nerfs, etc., just all these shit changes, it's actually safer to go back to the start of Season 2 and just start from there. Just scrap Season 3 entirely. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this point of time for the game, the only real complaints that were Forged Armour, the Brute, and the Basilisk were a bit too strong. That's it. Like, those were the major issues we had. Outside of that, we were just really starved of content for like a very, very long time. So we are going to be talking about those points with regards to game balance, but first let's talk about matchmaking. Matchmaking in the Cycle Frontier works great. The main problem is usually that there just isn't enough players to allow it to properly function. We can make a better system though through having a gear-based matchmaking system, using that as the default system and player performance as a secondary supplement system. So the way that this would work is to have two brackets. Bracket 1 would consist of players with white to blue armor, and bracket 2 would consist of players with blue to legendary armors. This system would be based specifically on armor and not weapons, attachments, or keycards, and this is because armor is the only combat related item that cannot be purchased outright. Yet. And cannot be safe pocketed to abuse the system. The main differences between the two brackets outside of the players that populate them is that the lower bracket would have a permanent buff to creature part drop rates similar to being in a storm 24/7, and the higher bracket would have a buff to loot inside of containers. What this would promote would be farming money and cooperation in the lower bracket and PvP over points of interest like the community room keycard in the higher bracket. Dropping in with blue tier armor would have the possibility of placing you into either bucket 1 or 2. And at this point, your other stats like your kill death ratio, your performance over the last 10 or so raids, those kinds of things would determine where you go with your bucket placement in this scenario. A very big point of a system like this would be to have all of this information conveyed to the player. No hidden little mechanics or tricks to mess with people, just straight up, your armor determines the bracket you're in. Now the system isn't perfect, no system is. There's a clear way someone with experience can go and bully lower geared players, but at that point there's no system that will really stop them from finding a way to do that if they choose to. They're just a dick. If an experienced player was to drop into bracket 1 purposefully with green armor or something like that, the hope would be that they would act in a friendly manner and possibly even teach newer players a thing or two. But segregating the player base in this way would result in a healthier experience for new players and a very clear pathway for progression into the end game and higher tier PvP. To then add to all of this, having blue tier armor purchasable would be a healthy mechanic coming in towards the mid game after certain quest unlocks. Only the standard armor though, not the tactical or the restoration variants. Tharis Island should also have a blue armor minimum requirement to drop down, as without decent armor, the station should view it as a waste of a perfectly good drop pod. I'm actually of the opinion that crafting costs should be reduced, but assuming they stay the same, for blue gear a helmet should cost 15,000 K-marks and a shield 25,000. At this point I need to remind you that we are starting with Season 2 and moving forward, so none of the increased item weights are in effect, meaning that a lot more money making methods are now viable again. The nerfing of certain money making methods that were implemented in Season 3 were put in place to slow down experienced players, but in reality just resulted in hurting the casual player base just so much more. The same goes with the ammunition changes meant to stop people running good guns every single raid, only resulted in just this massive gatekeep situation for those unlocking these guns for the first time. So now we're starting to paint a picture of this different version of Fortuna 3, clearly dividing newer and experienced players with better forms of progression and easier ways to make money, but we still aren't done with the basic points. Jobs. Jobs in this game have the potential to be amazing. And honestly, in the mid-game, they're pretty good. They are an excellent way to make money, but fall off extremely hard in the endgame. But they can be fixed super easily with just a couple of features. By implementing a skip feature for jobs at the cost of 1 for easy, 3 for medium, and 5 for hard, you can have more control over what jobs you do. Then by randomizing the rewards, some of the more tedious jobs can be very worth your while, like the ICA job of killing a Howler on Crescent Falls and stashing the dart for 22k. It's a fucking horrible job, but the exact same job coming in with the reward of something like a community room keycard, well, now that job might be something you actually want to do. That's not saying that that job can only reward that keycard, but any job can give you any reward from its corresponding reward pool. Easy pool for the easy jobs and so on. Those two changes alone would drastically increase the amount of jobs completed, but we can actually further improve the jobs mechanic with just a couple of more adjustments. First off, we should be tracking all of the data when it comes to jobs that are skipped, what job it was and what the rewards were. Then with this data, we can make adjustments to the jobs that are undesirable, like stashing a bunch of polymetallic prefab in the Neutron processing plants. Who the fuck wants to do that? But first, we can increase the rewards, and then, if it's still being skipped, change up the job. With the end goal of being something like having a 75% job completion rate. On how to increase the rewards, when it pulls from a pool of jobs, you would have to, say, 20 rewards in any given pool, ranked with the number 1 through 20. The worse the rewards, the lower the number. When a job is given, it rolls a 20-sided die. The number that it lands on is then put up as the reward. If set up correctly, you could adjust it by stating that the X job, when rolled, has a 3 plus the dice roll, and if the solution for that is above 20, then it rounds back down to 20. This would be particularly useful when looking at jobs like handing in Velticide hearts, where it should be something like a 10 plus the dice roll for rewards. That's one of the two further improvements. The other is reusing content, a Yager specialty, by using the campaign missions as jobs. Missions like collecting the data controller from the crashed ship or the holodeck from the Tharis puzzle to stash in Pinnacle Labs would actually make really, really great jobs. Alright, that's pretty much the base game covered, Season 2 plus all of that. Let's get into a bit more of the game balance stuff and then some of the content. The aforementioned Bassy Brute meta. This was honestly, in my opinion, wasn't that big of a deal. It certainly didn't deserve to be nerfed in the fashion that it was. Starting off with the Basilisk, my actual favorite gun in the game. The fact that it can't headshot and bodyshot kill a purple armor, but a hammer can, is an absolute fucking joke. Simply adjusting it so that this is the case with a purple penetration mod would immediately bring this gun back from the grave. The Brute nerf was needed, but instead of adjusting the damage fall off, testing and recording all of the data that it got, the typical Yager treatment of just being nerfed into the ground right next to the Bassy. For the Brute, having a small increase in recoil, but not as drastic as we saw in the Season 3 change, alongside the damage over distance fall off that was adjusted for all SMGs, but keeping the 9 damage would be warranted and would keep the Brute relatively competitive. But now to some really juicy stuff. If you guys know me, then you know I love the Advocate. You also know that I think the Advocate is absolute trash. It constantly gets beaten out by just every single other AR in the game. It was nerfed at the end of Season 1 and never really came back. The fix for the Advocate is actually the fix for pretty much every single assault rifle in this game, and that is to lower the headshot damage multiplier. Currently, the majority of ARs have a 1.7 times multiplier. Reducing this to a 1.5 times would immediately solve a lot of issues, like how strong the fucking core currently feels. But this is also a nerf to the Advocate, and if I think it's weak, then why would I nerf it further? Well, because it needs to go back to 11 damage per shot. Nerfing the headshot damage on all ARs is a step in the right direction, and buffing the Advocate to 11 damage keeps it in just about the same spot as it's in now. But that extra damage affects the mid-range gunfights a hell of a lot more when you take into account things like the damage over distance fall-off mechanic. But a big win with the gear-based matchmaking system we talked about earlier is that we can effectively balance the game for two different scenarios: the lower gear brackets and the higher gear brackets. There's lots we can do here to adjust things to make them feel better. Personally, I'm a big fan of just adjusting the player scale modifier in the damage equation from 0.03 to 0.04. What this would do would mean that the gap between penetration and armor would be felt more, going from a 13.1% damage increase to a 16.77% increase and a 5 armor difference, a 23.1% to a 28.6% increase at 10, and 31.1 to 37.5% at 15 difference. Capping the damage increase here at 15 or 18 penetration would be a neat little move. These numbers are also true for damage reduction going the other way, but I wouldn't recommend capping this figure whatsoever, meaning that a white AR would do 6.1 damage per shot against exotic armor, meaning 17 shots to kill exotic. A further 2-shot difference from how it is currently. However, this situation shouldn't really happen under the proposed matchmaking changes. It's just to more so give you an idea of how it would realistically play out. To further back that up, a PDW would do like 99 damage on 20 hits, so it'd need an extended mag to kill someone in exotic with full accuracy. That's assuming just body shots, no headshots. Okay, let's talk new content. Fuck the Howler. The thing sucks in its current implementation. In my guide on how to cheese the Howler, I stated that this is one of the worst designed enemies I've ever come across in gaming. And it took a comment by a viewer asking me what exactly about the design of the Howler I hated so much. I'd actually sit back and think about it and realize that the Howler is actually one of the best designed enemies I've come across, but for the love of God, did its implementation into a game like this suck so much that 99% of the player base hates it. Like a pure, burning, passionate hatred. But let's fix it for these guys at Yager, because they just fucking can't. First of all, remove the Howler from the open world of the game. The current design of the Howler has literally no place in this game to be out and about roaming around. We are going to be replacing the current design of the Howler with a juvenile Howler. One that's vocal cords haven't quite grown yet, so its screech attacks aren't able to be utilized. It hosts about a quarter of the HP of the current Howler, is down in armor tier, and the amount of darts it can shoot are about halved from the current Howler's attacks. Think like a mature Rattler with wings. These juvenile Howlers will drop the Ichor bulbs 100% of the time, and 25% of the time will drop a Howler dart. And they'll roam the maps in packs of 2 to 4. Alongside this, these juveniles aren't actually ready for reproduction, so all of the nests on the map are removed. No more goop, no more explosive egg sacs ruining map traversal and pathing. The Howling Skies questline is now about finding out where these creatures came from, as they were thought to be hunted to extinction. Osiris sends you on multiple missions to survey sites, gather information, and eventually leads up to telling you that the only possible explanation for the sudden re-emergence of the Howler is due to an old research facility from before the storms. At the end of the questline, you unlock the ability to craft a new key. This key will unlock the exotic triple question mark doors on Bright Sands and Crescent Falls to gain access to 2 different facilities. Upon opening the door, you will enter a research facility, fight through mobs, and the first instances of the explosive egg sacs are going to be here. Past the facility, you will enter into a large field for another wave of mobs. Lastly, you will enter a giant aviary with the current version of the Howler inside of it. Renamed the mature Howler or whatever. It doesn't really matter what you call it, just put it inside of there and get it the fuck out of the open world. Inside, fight the big mosquito through 3 waves with the intervals set at thirds of its health. Upon reaching each third portion of its health, it will sit up high on a cliff to roost, do a big screech, call in reinforcements, change a bit of the terrain by crumbling away, that kind of thing. And then if you kill it, it's a 100% drop rate for the Howler Sirens, the same as the Alpha Crusher Heart, and done. That's how you implement the Howler successfully. Easy. Now, Mark II and prototype weapons. What a way to piss off literally everyone. Just wow. Dominating the entire game for so long with how busted they were, right up until large portions of the player base quit before doing anything about it. This really never should have been put into the game. I mean, all they needed to do was grab the Core 47, shorten it, give it 11 damage, 20 penetration, and bam, there's your slow rate of fire SMG sorted. Keeps so many people happy, it actually fills a gap in weaponry and is new content. But nah, we got the Yager special of just reusing shit. The Forge on Tharis Island is currently dead content outside of players running it for slags, for the god-awful Fortuna's Favoured quests. And while it did need some tweaking, the overall design of the Forge was amazing. I personally thought it was near perfectly designed, with the multiple aspects of the game you could engage with in a single Forge run on Tharis Island. I truly liked it. But at the same time, I can also recognize that the meta sets were an issue. But an issue of a meta that has since changed. Forge did not need to change with it. As such, this is how the Forge should be tweaked to be nerfed, but still relevant. I think that upgrading gear should still remain, so blue to purple and purple to exo, exo to legendary, but with some changes. When upgrading the tier of gear, you cannot add perks during that Forge. Perking gear is a separate Forge, but gear with existing perks should not be wiped upon upgrading. This would give you a reason to upgrade that god roll piece of gear without the possibility of losing those perks. Alongside this, upgrading gear tiers should only cost 2 bars, and rolling perks should cost 1 bar. This still ties into the 3 bars for an item with perks, but re-rolling perks would feel like a waste of time and resources anymore. Also, legendary bars, come on man, they're just too fucking rare to just use 3 to roll shitty perks on a gear. A final change I'd like to see would be that when re-rolling perks, it would be impossible to get the same perk on the re-roll. Or, lastly, something I recommended last season actually was to have the option of adding more of an item required to ensure a higher roll of the perk. For example, a bag rolled with 2 meteor cores currently can receive either bag capacity of 10 to 50 or reduced weight of all items 10 to 50%. Proposed would be that 1 meteor core equates to 10 to 30, 2 is 10 to 50, and 3 is 30 to 50. A way of ensuring your time isn't wasted as much, but if just one of these last 2 points were implemented, it would probably be fine and cancel each other out. Lastly, for the Forge, there just needs to be a way to straight up forge a slag. It's annoying and tedious to grind for, it's unenjoyable, and literally nobody wants to do it. It's just pure RNG and it's just shit. Just make it so 6 exotic ingots make a slag and it's fixed. That's just literally all it takes. Such an easy win. Alright, more content. Faction Wars. This is actually an idea that I pitched to them months ago. fully fleshed out with proper lore and everything behind it, but mid-season for a limited time, each faction will be pitted against each other. The whole reason for this is because each faction is competing against each other to put a new weapon into mass production. So at the beginning of the event, each weapon will be put on display at the faction heads in the station. Assuming we ever get a shooting range, you would be able to take these weapons and test them in the shooting range at a grey rarity, just to give you a feel of what you're going to be fighting for. Points would be awarded for prospector kills with faction weaponry, completing endgame activities like the drill, oil, and dungeon, and by completing jobs. At the end of the event, the winning faction has a 1 week 50% off all gear sale, and then in the next game season, the weapon is put into mass production. This idea was actually pitched to them before the announcement of no wipes, and also included other bits like a smuggler had crash landed, and a bunch of all three weapons were sort of just littered around the world during the end of wipe events, like the ones we had in Cataclysm and Storm Rider. So the idea behind that was that you would be able to find these guns and use them at just random rarities, just for a bit of fun, end of season event. Tagging onto this portion would actually be the best way, in my opinion, for an actual Fortuna's Favoured competition. It's no secret that the majority of the player base finds Badham's questline tedious, annoying, and just overall a massive grind and just really shit. I myself see no point in it with the rampant cheating issues in the game, but instead of the crap that we have in the game currently, we change it so that only the top 100 contributors from each faction will gain access to the Fortuna's Favoured rewards for that season, meaning limited time cosmetics and an actual prestigious position, make that side of the game all the more rewarding, challenging, and interesting. That's not really all I have to say, but I've been getting a bit heated talking about this, and as someone who has tried to maintain a relatively positive attitude towards this game, it's just been getting harder and harder every day to try to defend it when it's been in such a shit position with such simple, obvious fixes for so long. Of course, my suggestions aren't going to be perfect. No one's are. You may like them, you may not. At this point, I don't really care anymore. I love the Sacred Frontier. It's a great game. It has the potential to be the game. But it can't with this development team. I was striving to unlock the Karambit as a personal goal, but I don't see the point when I get targeted by blatant cheaters just for running exotic guns, let alone legendaries. So yeah, I've still got a bunch of content to post for the Sacred Frontier, but from here on out I'll be scaling back the amount of time I play it, looking at other games to play and create content for, and hopefully move on from the cycle. Sorry for the rant style of video, I just really needed to say some of these things, make my position known, I guess. Yeah, hope you guys enjoy the rest of the cycle content that I'll be posting. Hopefully it gets better. See ya.